So, first of all, it's very good to see you all. It has been a long time, and we are very excited to present today. This past year has been a journey of intense development and collaboration at the Newer Lab, and we are very happy to share with you today our progress and, more importantly, to hear your feedback. So this past year has been defined by growth, not only our research and developing of technologies, but as you can see in the picture, our garden is blossoming and our team has grown significantly. Today, our team is going to do most of the talking, sharing the project that they have been leading the past year. We're also very happy to introduce three new core members of the lab, including Batel Yosef Ravid as Director of Research, Keren Mabar as Resource Development, and Ro'i Levi as Head of Strategic Partnerships. So, our vision or our mission is rebuilding a more resilient Negev. We address this by focusing on three key themes: informal, desert cities, and health in place that are deeply intertwined, and we will elaborate on each one of them shortly. We are not only addressing those themes, but also applying them across three different scales of impact from the street scale to the neighborhood district scale and also to the regional scale. Moving between the scales allow us the broad territorial planning and high resolution human data. And now we're going to really focus on the four different projects our team is going to present. And we're going to start with the first one, informal. And Noam is going to do the talking. Noam,
Hi. So this slide
maybe
is
first introduce yourself and then present.
sure. Hi. I'm Noam. I'm originally from the US. I'm a PhD student at the Hebrew University. I came to Israel on a Fulbright and chose to stay and join the NOR lab. And I live here now with my fiance and yeah, that's me. I'm going to present today about a project that we did for the Bedouin communities, especially Bedouin communities living in unrecognized villages in the Negev. Unrecognized because they're informally planned and legally unrecognized as municipalities or even as legal constructions under the law. Um, so these villages have major gaps in the public infrastructure that's available to them, and this affects everything from sanitation to education to, especially for the focus of this project, access to protected shelters in the events of military crises, such as last year there was a war with Iran, and there were a number of missile attacks targeting the Negev, and many casualties due to these attacks, especially from the blast wave and from fragments that fall from the sky after the missiles are intercepted. And so there's a big effort to build even temporary shelters that can provide some protection from the shrapnel that emits from the blast wave and from falls from the sky. These shelters are called miguniyot in Hebrew. They're temporary, they're mobile, they will not protect from a direct impact, but they still can protect against 90 to plus percentage of the risk that occurs. And the Israeli government has distributed several hundred of these to the unrecognized villages in the aftermath of the beginning of the war, in the regional conflict, really, in 2023 after there were a number of casualties. And in that, during the Iran war, we were interested in rapidly developing a tool to guide further placement of these shelters as soon as possible during this moment of uncertainty. So we developed this tool we called the Right to Shelter. There's a short video, it's mainly in Hebrew, demonstrating this tool. This was published in the Yediot Achronot, which is a local Israeli newspaper. It's one of the most read or most subscribed newspapers in Israel. And the goal of this tool was to, first of all, analyze the gaps to show where there was low accessibility through heat maps. And then secondly, to allow users to prescribe solutions and select the amount of new shelters that they sought to add, and to see how those would improve coverage and to find optimal locations to place them. And then once they had a certain number of shelters placed in the most optimal way to achieve their target outcome, based on the budget of the amount of shelters they could place, these scenarios we hope will influence policy. Can we move to the next slide? Um, unless it's frozen for me, I just see the video paused. Ah, okay. So here we have this diagram. This is showing the logic of this platform. We try to keep it as simple as possible for a couple of reasons. One is because research has shown that simple tools are much easier for policymakers, even technical experts, to use, and make it much more likely that they will be used. And secondly, to encourage members of the public to use them by lowering the technical barrier to entry. And thirdly, to make it as simple as possible to develop, because we were hoping to develop this in emergency response timeline so that any emergency response that would occur in the immediate aftermath of the war, it would already be available to them to use. Um, so it's really one, two, three. You set the radius of accessibility you're interested in, add the number of shelters, see how it changes the outcomes. And we see this as something that could be reused in other areas. Any informal settlement can use the open buildings data that we used as the main data for where the population was. Um, we filtered it to try to focus on residential areas based on certain parameters in consultation with local architects. But the basic data is there, and it doesn't, in just because the government doesn't collect data on where people live in these informal settlements, which legally don't exist, it doesn't mean that data can't be found through mining open data sources, and very quickly turned into actionable tools on distributing anything from earthquake shelters to flood shelters, to fire resource investments. And we found that this tool can demonstrate far increased far better placement of shelters than were actually placed, and those shelters were placed very poorly for a couple of reasons. One, because there's a lack of data on where the informal settlements are and how many people live there, and secondly, because of regulatory issues that prevents them from placing them in these informal settlements. So they ended up placing a lot of them along the side of the road because it's technically public property and it's like legally you can place the shelter at these bus stops very easily, whereas going into these villages and actually placing them where they were needed was a regulatory challenge. And these types of things came about later in the process when we were presenting. First of all, this is a presentation we did to the Knesset, which is the Israeli legislature, I guess the equivalent of Congress. But we also presented to the government bodies directly responsible for the area that we're interested in, the regional council of the East Negev, and then it's like a municipality. It's like a group of municipality, a council of municipalities that are responsible for the relevant area. And also we have sent it and we're in contact with the government body that's responsible for distributing these shelters, the Homefront Command. And there's a big tension there because Homefront Command, they generally coordinate with local municipalities to place these shelters. So they basically put the shelters where they're told to place them. But since there is no local municipality, there's nobody to tell them where to place them. And this is like a major regulatory challenge and was actually part of what was being discussed in this Knesset meeting. Here is how to change the regulations to enable placements of these shelters in a more efficient way. And we suggested this tool as something that could guide that when it does occur. To date, they haven't distributed additional shelters, although I'm hopeful that that will change. I think hopefully it will change before conditions force them to realize that it needs to change. And as people who read the news may know, that those conditions do seem increasingly likely. Um, I think that's the end of the segment of the slides. Yep.
Now it's my turn. So I'm Tuval. I'm the front-end engineer for now. I've been a data analyst for the last 9 years in HP Indigo. And I've joined Nu pretty recently because it just looked very cool, all the stuff they are doing, and I wanted to be a part of it. And what I started to work on is climate change, or making Be'er Sheva a global living lab for desert urbanism. Leveraging our multidimensional data to create scalable models for climate resilient cities. In desert cities, extreme heat and lack of shade make public spaces harder to use and urban life less inclusive. The Desert Tech City Lab is a strategic collaboration between municipality, academia, and industry, bring together real companies with existing solutions to test and validate their technologies on the ground in Beersheba. This accelerator program that you're seeing pictures now of just concluded yesterday with two winning companies who will now move forward with the implementation in Beersheba. You can move to the next slide. We also built a tool called Scorch, which is what you're seeing now. You're seeing a 3D thermal view of the street in Beersheba, where we can change the time. Each point represents the UTCI or how it feels on that point. We can compare different scenarios that we prepare. We can change the layers to see different types of layering. Currently, it's only trees and buildings, but we plan to have more. We also have the shading index, which shows how much an area is shaded. And here is also the tree impact, and not only the impact from buildings. So this is the tool that we built. I will also go through shortly how it works. It always gets stuck on after videos. Okay, so the workflow for the tool is pretty simple. Everything on the back end is built in Python. We accept a 3D urban model as a GLB file from Rhino, SketchUp, or Blender. And we take also climate data from EPU files or connect directly to weather station APIs to get temperature, wind, humidity, solar radiation, everything we need to calculate the temperature, the UTCI. And everything is processed in the backend using Python, dry mesh, and you can go back a little bit, like the previous slide. The main part of Scorch is the processing engine, which gives the benefit against traditional, let's call it, tools. Usually using Grasshopper and Ladybug, which is what we tested against. High resolution urban thermal comfort models can take a lot of time, from hours to even days, depending on the complexity of the model and the size. Using Embrace C++, which is a library developed by Intel for fast and high performance ray tracing and parallel multiprocessing. We take what those applications can do and just do it faster. Again, everything is in Python using external libraries and some stuff that we wrote. Go to the next slide, please. Everything that is calculated on the back end is exported as a binary file for fast web delivery, which flows finally to the viewer you saw earlier, which is built in Svelte and Free.js, which lets us explore this model in a 3D way, across time, across different scenarios. And we also plan to add a bunch of stuff into it, like automated scenario generation, ground material impact, daylight and solar access and solar lights, extreme heat wave simulations, wind simulations, which is also an integral part of the UTCI. And finally, a real-time analysis API, where right now the backend and the frontend sit separately and don't really talk to each other. And we want to create this as a unified tool for a real-time plan. And you can go to the next slide. Yes. We are also examining future interventions based on 3D scans. As you can see here, we have a We have a VR, a Meta Quest in the lab, and we 3D scan the same street that you saw earlier in the tool. And we are playing and trying to see how we can integrate these kind of technologies into the planning process, including the urban thermal comfort tool that I showed earlier. I think that's pretty much it. Unless you have to add something, Mera, to that. All right.
Thank you, Toval. Merav?
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
So, hi everyone. I'm Mirav. I'm a master's student for urban design at Bezalel School of Architecture, a graduate of Ben Gurion University, and I'm also an artist, and I do projection mapping, which is a big part of the reason why I was excited to join the lab. And I'm from Jerusalem nowadays. And I'm going to present the third topic our lab focuses on, which is health in cities. So, so how does the urban space affect health? The urban environment is as we know, we all know, is a complex system and affects health in many ways. But we focus on three main factors. One is the environmental factors, it's the climate, the air pollution, also the way the city interacts with the environment. We could see this in urban heat islands or different uh, effects that there are. There's the built environment, which is the building, how the buildings look and act, density, open space ratio, access to open spaces in nature. And we have the accessibility to health services, which is both the hospitals and clinics themselves, but also how to get to these places, transportation, connectivity, all these have an effect on our health. So we focus on the Negev. The lab sits in Sheva, the capital of the Negev, the southern region. The reason we focus on the Negev is because there's actually a dire need for understanding how to improve the health in the Negev. There's high mortality rate, low life expectancy, and also large socioeconomic gaps, which we understand is a big factor that affects health in the city. So the tool that we'll zoom in on is called, this is what I'm developing. It's called Neighborhood 95 or Kidscope. We still haven't found a good name for it. But basically, it's an interactive platform designed for use by the local authorities. And the idea is to map and understand children's health in the city in a more comprehensive way. And I'll go in to what this means and what our process looked like. So next slide. Yeah. So can you move to the next slide? Yeah. So so at first our process started with, one before? Yeah. So our process started with understanding what is children's health in cities, and it's a big question, it's complicated. So we broke it down to 6 categories: walkability, safety and security, availability of services and parenting support, physical and environmental quality and nuisance prevention, access to nature and green spaces, access to play environments, and community resilience and sense of belonging. These are the categories which we had a lot of talks and conversations about how to get to there. And what's special about our tool is that it combines 3 different types of data to get a comprehensive and multidimensional idea of the health. So we have the physical data, which is it comes from GIS, from roads, buildings, accessibility to different to the kindergarten, to basically anything that we could get that layers. We have soft data, which is a more to get the perception of the residents. And we have a pilot in 2 neighborhoods in Beersheba, which we're going to start with. There's through polls and focus groups, we're going to get this data. And thirdly, we're going to compare this with medical data of especially weight and height and respiratory issues to see how the statistics also compare to the physical and soft data. So the tool we're focusing on different scales to see how these different factors affect the day-to-day life. So we have the house and the immediate, you can press, do a click. Yeah. So we have the immediate environment, 300 meters. Kids don't usually go walk much farther than that. We have the neighborhood to see the local, there, and the city, which is the larger view. And we have this is kind of like a spatial to understand how this looks. And we have also the accessibility and how to get from the house to these services and how does the path look? So in conclusion, you can press again. So you can see the tool again after you understood this whole process. And we're hoping that this tool will be able to help with urban planning, create model forecasting, public participation, and further research and development.
Hi, my name is Itit. I'm an architect, and I'm going to talk about the project Space of Agreement. The project is about scaling up the city scope to the regional area, and then working with different interactive tools, also for public engagement, but also for the planning process. The region itself is the southwest of Israel, and we focused on using the city scope as a framework for rebuilding after conflict. So obviously, post-conflict rebuilding is very complex and sensitive. And one of the main challenges is that there are so many different parties at different scales involved, and they have different backgrounds and different agendas. And so we wanted to show how we use the city scope to kind of get a discussion and communication going between these parties. This is the revival. If you could go back a second, that's the revival region. And so this is the basic proposal we had for the model. You can see it's almost 5 meters long. The area itself is 70 kilometers, so that's 1 to 14,000. And yeah, that's that's the model, the city scope we have. So it's split into 3. The first one is the physical model of the whole region. And then we have the option of connecting to it with an iPad or a phone. And then you can control the layer visibility of the projection and the zooming in and out and things like that. And then the third option is also a big screen. On it, you can see the area you zoomed in on, and then any kind of textual information you have. So if you have land use, you can see the plan and all the information in the land use categories. We're adding different interactive tools. So you can see up there on the right, something we call the pink line, which I'll talk about later, but it's different interactive tools to use with this collection of like the model, the screens, the iPad.
Great. So
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in here. I'm the technical lead, so I'll just very quickly explain the technical setup here. There are 2 main user inputs. There's a remote controller, which you guys saw. It's like sort of a joystick plus zooming in and out plus layer control. You can open up the layers and choose what layers get displayed on the projection front end. And then there's a second user input, which is a web form, where users can submit geometries and comments, and it gets saved to Supabase and then gets added to the Django and delivered to the front end. I'm not going to spend too much time on the middleware. If you want, you can email me and ask me some questions. And then the output ends up being two things that are synchronized. There's a projection where you can see what is being focused on in the remote controller, and the focused part gets synchronized to the leaflet, which is a GIS application where you can hover over each point and see additional information on this like TV. And then the projection display, you can also choose which layers are being shown, change them also through the phone, choose which comments and new geometries that were uploaded through the Supabase you want to add to the layers that are going to be projected. And in general, the idea here is to make the user, the person standing around the table with their phone, to be able to control and change and soon draw upon the data as much as possible. And this is like the basic technical design. I won't go further on that.
Yeah, so here you can see that because the physical model is so big, it took us a really long time to kind of decide on the scale and all the different printing parameters, everything, so that we could decide how best to print the model for the data that we wanted to show. So yeah, you can see here we're also in the process of maybe printing smaller models for each one of the villages. So each village right now, the regional model we have, the big one, is used for the public planning of the public space. But then there's all these little villages, and each one of them is going through a process right now of their own planning process. So of course, for them, public engagement is very important as well. So we're gonna maybe print all these smaller models. And then here you can see what I talked about before, the pink line. So this is one of the tools. This line is a proposal by one of the architecture firms that is working on the project. They want this trail to serve as a main trail connecting the region, and they want it to connect like memorial sites, monuments, hiking trails, cycling tracks, but also maybe tourist opportunities. And one of their main points in the proposal is that they want it to be respectful and mindful towards the local residents. So of course, it needs to be enraged in such a way that it benefits the local residents, but doesn't invade their personal space or their personal memorial sites. So this is obviously something that needs to be planned together with the community. And that's what the tool is for. And then here, we're going to see the production of the model. So you can see the size of it and how it works together with the screen. So right now it sits in lab, but yeah, it's going to move into its official space and then be open to the public. And then in the next slide, we'll see the way it works with the controller. Yeah, so you can see Noam here with the controller on his phone in this case. And you can see how he's controlling also the screen, but also then the projection of the layers and how the three elements work together. And in the next slide, we'll see some photos from our first presentation to the planning authorities. And in March, we have 2 workshops planned with also local representatives and also different heritage planning teams. And so we're looking forward to that, to see how the tool is implemented, but then also get feedback and see the public engage with the city scope. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Batel Yosef Ravid, and thank you for having me. I'm also an architect and applied researcher. and now I'm also the director of research in the lab. So we established the new collab, which is a partnership between academic and government working together on real urban challenges. And we, as you see here, you see different projects that our team present today, and we would like to, in this opportunity, to create together grants and also research across border research. And you see here today different topics and the idea of project that we work on, and we will be happy like to discuss it furthermore and to find um, together different way how to collaborate for bigger research. So thank you.
Okay. Lastly, I'm Jonathan, by the way. I lead technology at Noor. We are kicking off the AI X Cities conference, which is going to happen 13th of May. So this is something we're building together with Kent, and Ariel, which are going to join us. The focus of the one-day conference is going to be what's happening now. There's a lot of like grassroots attempts at AI at the city level, at the regional level, and we're trying to see sort of a point in time to see how these things are being deployed now. The panel are going to be mixed by a lot of municipal leaders. We're going to get some researchers. We are hoping to get some of the larger players locally, NVIDIA, Google, Microsoft, S3, to give their take on where things are going. So hoping to see everyone there. This is open invite, and yeah, it's going to be fun. I think this wraps everything up, right, Merav? Or do we have another section?
No, 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 this
Fantastic.
is the last one.
Okay. Questions, comments?
Well, maybe I'll start. First of all, it's just so great to see all of this new work. It's always impressive, and there are so many things we could talk about. I'm really looking forward to being in Israel again in May. I haven't been there for many years, so that's exciting for me. And the this one day conference looks terrific. I have just one question about the health project. I mean, just of many things we could talk about, but I bring this up because we're working on a health-related urban project, trying to put a proposal together, and it's this that architecture and urban design can be thought of as a public health intervention, and that wasn't really addressed in the way you framed it. And by making physical activity the natural choice that people make in their daily lives, prominent stairs that encourage stairs over elevator use, shaded walking paths that turn errands into pedestrian trips rather than car trips, bike lanes that make cycling practical and safe. And the data shows that these daily decisions can lower rates of obesity and cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes, improve mental health. And so you can think of the environment, the design of the environment as a kind of preventative medicine that shapes behavior through everyday design. And I think there is data that shows this actually can be more effective in improving public health than technology, such as Fitbit or the Apple Watch or even gym memberships. So my question is, would you consider expanding your focus to include these kind of behavioral aspects of urban design as a public health intervention?
Um, Actually, that's is exactly our aim. I mean, that's what we're focusing on, understanding how the individual families, how they behave, what are their day-to-day patterns, and exactly, and that's our thought is also to design a tool for in this case it's Be'er Sheva, but it could be expanded to other authorities, so how they can then adjust or plan the city better. So people would walk, so people would go to green spaces, so people, all the things that you have mentioned. So
Hmm.
that's exactly what we are aiming to.
Hmm.
Also, how the city, addresses the different amenities, where it decides to locate a kindergarten if it's next to a big road that has more pollution and more noise, and
Hmm.
so we are doing it on these three levels. First of all, geospatial, then going to the public to see exactly what makes them decide, for example, how they take their kids to kindergarten. Do they use a car because they maybe work outside of the city and anyways on their way, or understanding their
Hmm.
day-to-day patterns? And what's exciting is that we are now addressing research to Clalit, which is the largest HMO, so we will receive medical data about children's position in Beersheba. So then we can
Hmm.
compare what we are receiving with medical data, focusing on obesity, height and weight,
Hmm.
and respiratory issues. So, and actually, there are many other projects we are leading about health. So we would be happy, Kent, to think together. We just
Okay.
won a grant about accessibility to health services in Beersheba Metro.
Hmm.
Um, we had the head of neurology of Soroka, the medical center, coming to the lab because he is interested in researching how migraines in the city and other things. So, I mean, there are a lot of
Yeah.
collaborations with doctors, the Soroka hospitals, the Clalit, and even the Ministry of Health.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. I guess what I'm saying is I'm particularly interested in architecture and urban design as a behavior change mechanism,
Mhm.
in addition to all the other health-related indicators you can look at.
Kent, maybe to complement this point, you might have seen this in the work that Tuval mentioned, going down from the sort of urban scale to the urban design scale or the architecture scale, especially in the context of a desert city like Beersheba. The work that we do with 3D scanning and kind of collecting high resolution data from the street scale is exactly targeted the point
Yeah.
that you're bringing. How do even if your streets are perfectly aligned in terms of functions and amenities and proximities and everything, if you don't have the right set of trees, the right set of canopies to walk in a desert area, you wouldn't walk,
Right.
right? So
Well,
that's
that's
what
why I
kind of,
bring that up because I'm aware of that work, and I think that's great.
yeah,
And, I think it could be framed a little more clearly,
Mhm.
to encourage healthy behaviors, increase physical activity through these interventions, like planting the right types of trees in the right
Mhm.
location on the right paths. What are those specific interventions?
exactly. Mirav, maybe you want to mention in a word the work that you do with the Htzel?
Um, well, yes, I mean, one of the Toval was talking about it, but there was an accelerator program, so Newell was a part of it, and also it was a collaboration with it's called the Center for Shading and Tree Planting in Israel and the university, the Ben Gurion University, and the municipality. So it was really trying to do a hands-on. There were six startups. There was different products in different stages. That was actually an accelerator that ended yesterday. Um, our part, we have done all the climate and spatial analysis. And it was really a great collaboration because he had industry, academy, and municipality. And it's talking exactly about that. Their focus was on the innovation district on Beersheba and how we can mitigate heat and shading within the city. So how you
Hmm.
can create much more pleasant public spaces. And there were two winning companies, two winning startups that the Beersheba municipality promised that they are going to test and put into ground their products. So it's very exciting. So it's not only theory, it's really coming into motion and action. And so yeah, so we have like all different kinds of collaborations and projects. So it's not only developing tools, but also seeing their application on the real world.
And Marav, if I'm not
Fantastic.
mistaken, there is an actual street that they dedicated to test some of these startup solutions, right?
It's going to be in the innovation district. So I don't know if it's only one street, but it's within the core of the innovation district. That's
Mhm.
what they chose. So yeah.
Fantastic. Good.
Maybe just a tiny word before we go into the next question, before we start losing people to time. I just want to sort of frame the presentation today, besides the feedback that we would love to hear from all of you, as a way to engage your interest and hopefully to get people collaborating and working with us. As Marav mentioned, we've been very busy establishing, setting up the kind of base ground for the lab over the past few months. But in recent months, let's say 3, 4, 5 months, we've been starting to get real projects with real world impact. And you've seen, I think, big part of that today. Anyone who have any interest in any of these projects, please reach out to Murav and us and talk to us, and we'll be very, very happy to collaborate. I know that there is a lot of overlap with work done in Chile, in Gipuzkoa, and in other places, and I think we can do cross-pollination very easily between these different lines of work. So join us. Happy to work with everyone.
Okay, great. We still have 5 minutes. So if there are more questions.
Yeah, no, I want to follow up a little bit what Ariel just said. I think that's quite important. I think it could be fantastic to connect the network with the good research that we have been seeing today. And so, congratulations, by the way. I mean, I am super impressed. A lot of new stuff, very, 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 very good. So it could be fantastic. Not only the network, maybe also in our team. Like I think there are a lot of research that overlaps with the work that we are doing in the group. So that could be fantastic, as Ken was talking about health. But also, like now we are starting to think about the operational system of the city. I know that nobody was really talking about the operational system, but the big city scope that you are building, the 5 meters, that's somehow always like a common ground. So I love that that model is amazing. I have a question about that. I always get trapped with the hardware, etc. So why we decide to use the phone as the way of interacting with the table? I mean, like it could. I mean, like I don't know if there is like a reason, or it's more like a learning process, or it's more like because we are gonna have different people interacting with the table. So I don't know if there is something there, but I like it. It was very intriguing, like maybe with the phone, and I don't know.
There's, if I can comment, Luis. So there's two types of phone. There's the controller, the person who manages the event, and then anyone who's on the same Wi-Fi at this point can comment and leave, interact with the model itself. So it's kind of these interactive forums you do in a large audience. It's the same but physical. But it's an experiment. Mid-March we'll have the first team. If it's a failure, we probably won't let you know. But if it's
No, no, I like it. So I mean, I would love to learn a little bit more. How is the interaction with the crowd of people?
yeah, for sure,
Like
sure. We should
I don't know
get
if
the teams together.
yeah, like if they're gonna be like geolocated, like kind of text, etc. But I was also like wondering about the also the person like interacting with the table also is using the phone. So that's no, it's like everybody around has. So it's cool. I mean, I just like trying to imagine the workshop. So maybe is the person there with the phone and saying, "Hey, what about this heat map?" And people are just giving opinions through the phone, or
Mm-hmm. 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 It's
okay.
so yeah, first workshop's going to be mid-March. We'll see how it works. The idea is, I mean, at first stage, it's a facilitator in a group that's within a same room, but we want to open it up to a bigger crowd, so you don't necessarily have to be in the same room. I mean, what it does, it aggregates, hundreds, maybe even thousands of comments and ideas people have, and we fence it differently, so we can aim at just people living there. We can aim at like general public. We can aim at, we can aim at professional designers and so on. and we start aggregating comments and data. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how we manipulate that. So obviously with LLMs, we can start to get some understanding of sentiment, what people want, what people are focused on, and try to get consensus, or at least basic understanding from this conversation. I think the nice thing about this project is that it's pan city, meaning it's a lot of cities together. So this is an absolute must to get consensus, because otherwise the project's not going to go through. So it's a zero-sum game in a weird way.
By the way, Carson from our group developed a very different application of the phone where you can fly over a model with your phone using the accelerometer to then render a 3D digital model from the viewpoint recognized by the location of the phone, and so lots of phone applications.
Yep.
Great.
Okay. More questions, or we still have 1 minute?
Maitana, maybe I'll add
Yeah.
quick note about the conference. So the conference is going to take place in Noor, and I understand that not all of you might physically be able to be there. Nevertheless, we might have an open call for projects or presentations or demos that we might want to present there in different varieties. So we'll send a kind of call for projects and general invitation in the coming days. So stay tuned, and we'll be happy to see you physically there, but if not, at least in demos and presentations.
Sorry,
No.
sorry, just going to say, maybe you could summarize who you expect to be there, how many people, what do you hope will be the impact of this?
So we're expecting like a mixed crowd. I mean, also architects, planners, but also from like the public service, from government authorities, from the industry, as Jonathan mentioned. We're approaching like the big companies like Google, Microsoft. And we have like different takes about how AI is engaged within the city. And we're hoping for like a 250 people crowd coming to the conference. So it is the first conference we're leading by Newell, so that's one thing. I mean, we didn't have a big conference yet. Also, we want to kind of own the subject. Everybody's talking AI with different fields, different relationships, and AI in the city. So we kind of like want to be the one owning the subject, and let's say if local authorities, if municipalities or industries, they have questions, so they can approach us. And exposure to the lab. I mean, it's for us an opportunity to bring different people from different sectors and expose the lab, what we're doing. And also, we're hoping the conference, I mean, we're thinking of it being taking place in one part of the city and then the other part being at the lab. And we're going to have a party at the end.
Fantastic. And no, I think it's great. Claim that space, AI in cities in Israel. And when people think about that, they go to NER. I think that's fantastic.
Absolutely.
So thank you all for coming. So yeah, thank you, Matana, and everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, Meraf, and the team for the great work. And thank you everyone for coming. And see you all in a month for the next network meeting. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.